You have looked down on me and insulted me. As such, we must duel. Cyan couldn't bear to be looked down on any longer, having received such disrespect from this country bumpkin.
Hey pal, something like a challenge to a duel isn't something you should do so casually.
He had never thought that something like a duel challenge would come from the mouth of this 13-year-old kid. Who's your pal?
If you don't want to be friends, then fine. In any case, don't say anything that you'll regret and just go. Stop bothering me already.
You're scared, right?
Scared?
That's right. It's obvious that you're scared. If you're too afraid to duel me, then just quickly apologize.
And what should I do if I'm not afraid, but I don't want to fight, and I don't want to apologize?
Don't you even know what honor is?
I do know that it isn't a word that you should utter so lightly.
You're insulting me again? That son of a bitch. Who does he think he is to keep telling me what to do?
Don't. A duel isn't something you recklessly jump into.
If you're afraid, then just admit it. Don't try to run away from our duel by spouting all these denials. Haven't your parents taught you what honor means? This is really the last time I'll say this. Beg me for forgiveness, and then
throw it.
Eugene said as he untied the sandbags hanging off his body.
You wanted to duel, so just throw it already. I said, throw it. A handkerchief, are you going to throw it or not?
First, the sandbags on his left arm fell to the ground. Cyan's expression froze, and then stiffened as the impact sent a shockwave of dust rising into the air. Then the sandbags on his right arm also fell. Lastly, Eugene pulled off his chainmail vest and threw it behind him. The vest flew quite a ways before falling to the ground with a heavy racket. Cyan's jaw dropped open at this scene. Eugene sat down and began untying the sandbags from the spear. Seal had been enjoying the show as if she was just a bystander, but now, she also let out an exclamation at this sight. Cyan was the first to bring up the duel, pestered Eugene despite his protests, and finally questioned Eugene's honor. Considering all this, he couldn't back down after coming this far. Cyan lifted a hand to a pocket on his chest and pulled out his handkerchief. I challenge you to a duel, Cyan cried out as he threw the handkerchief at Eugene. The fluttering handkerchief fell onto Eugene's shoulder. Cyan felt thrilled going into the first duel of his life. The moment he had thrown out his handkerchief, Cyan's heart had begun pounding with excitement. How should Cyan go about punishing him? In what manner should he teach this fool a lesson so that his younger sister could also admire his magnificence?
I accept.
Just as Eugene got to his feet, he thrust out his spear. The tip of the spear slammed into Cyan's stomach. Along with this scream, Cyan was sent rolling across the ground.
I've won.
Cyan sprayed vomit all over the place. The dumbstruck Seal let out a scream and ran over to Cyan. Even as tears and snot were pouring down his face, Cyan couldn't stop retching. Seal had approached him out of concern, but couldn't get any closer to her brother upon seeing his disgusting appearance. So instead, she turned and raised her head to glare at Eugene. Coward. Seal accused Eugene.
Who's a coward? From the moment that the handkerchief was thrown, the duel had already started. Since the duel had already started, there's nothing cowardly about what I did. And didn't your foolish brother end up like this because he just stood around trying to look cool after he threw the handkerchief?
You're right, but even so, it was still a cowardly act. You didn't fight honorably in this duel. You could have lightened your blow a bit.
Sorry, but that's already as light a blow as I can manage.
You must have trained your mana.
Children of the collateral lines weren't allowed to train their mana until the bloodline continuation ceremony. This was a long-standing Lionheart family tradition. Only the children of the main house could train their mana and wield real weapons from an early age.
That's obviously a lie. Without training your mana, how could you possibly be able to handle such weight?
It's the result of the training I've done since I turned 7. It's not like you've tried it out for yourself.
Don't lie to me. And then there's your attack. Even if my brother had let his guard down, it was still so fast that he couldn't react properly. As she said all this, her eyes that had been shining with curiosity narrowed in suspicion.
You were actually able to see it?
Just the littlest bit.
It seems like your eyes aren't just for decoration.
You really do have a nasty mouth on you.
It's far from my first time hearing that. And Cyan hadn't just stood there and received the strike. Instead, the moment the attack landed, Cyan had instinctively tried to jump backward. This meant that he, a kid with no practical fighting experience, had instinctively responded to escape imminent danger. That's great for a kid, but as a descendant of Vermouth, it's still garbage.
Seal was finding him even harder to understand. Both Seal and Cyan had also undergone physical training since they were young, but hasn't he only been training since he was 7? Seal thought deeply as she recalled what Eugene had said earlier. You dare. Cyan had finally recovered enough to speak. While taking deep breaths, Cyan raised his head and looked up at Eugene. His eyes were still spinning, and it hurt whenever he moved. How cowardly, Cyan gasped.
It might be because you're twins, but you two really do end up saying the same things. I don't want to repeat myself. Ask your sister what I said when she tried to accuse me of the same thing. Or else you can try and retrace your memories. You might have been spraying vomit everywhere as you were rolling in the dirt, but your ears should have still been working, right?
Eugene snickered as he looked down on Cyan. Cyan couldn't say anything in return.
Now then, you need to start cleaning all this up. You're the one who vomited all over the place. So if you promise to clean up this mess, I'll also go and clean the carriage. Then everything is nice and fair, right? Also, since you've lost the duel, the honorable and polite thing to do would be to acknowledge your defeat by humbly admitting even though you were spouting honor this and honor that earlier, you aren't really going to try and do something so disgraceful as to refuse to admit your defeat, are you?
Eugene continued to provoke him. You dare. Ugh. He couldn't say anything back. The pent-up anger and sorrow building up within him poured out as tears. As his nose kept sniffling sadly, Cyan buried his head in his arms.
I should have just held it in.
Eugene starting to think that screwing with this 13-year-old brat might not have been in his best interests. Finally starting to have a few concerns about the consequences of doing this. Right from the start, now that he had made the child of the main family fall into such a state. While Eugene was thinking about this and that, Cyan was desperately trying to hold back his tears. Young master. The shout came from afar, but the speaker quickly closed the distance. The man who arrived at the gymnasium was dressed in a uniform. What on earth is this? From the fact that he didn't have the lion heart on his breast to how he called Cyan a young master, the man had to be a knight in service to the main family. While Eugene couldn't tell how old the man was, he seemed much more skilled than Gordon, the knight who had been assigned to escort him here. Hazard, Cyan burst into tears. I lost. I challenged that bastard to a duel, but I lost. A duel. Hazard eyed Eugene with a stiff expression. Then he lowered his body and picked up Cyan. Pardon me for my late introduction. My name is Hazard, and I am in charge of tutoring young master Cyan. Hazard bowed his head in a nod.
I am Eugene Lionheart, from the Jidal province.
Jidal, you say? I believe that is where Lord Gerhard's estate lies.
Yes, he's my father.
So, what on earth happened here?
Cyan picked a fight with me. I tried not to argue with him, but Cyan insulted my father.
When did I do that? Cyan protested.
He said that my father had failed to teach me what honor means, and he called me a coward to my face.
Eugene calmly explained. At these words, Cyan's face went red.
He also said that my body smells like cow milk.
It's the truth. Your body really does smell like cow.
And your mouth smells like vomit, so why don't you just shut it?
So that's why you two dueled? Hazard asked.
Cyan didn't just insult me. He insulted my father. Sir Hazard, was there any reason why I shouldn't have accepted the duel?
You had a good reason for it, but it seems like you were a bit too heavy-handed, Hazard admonished Eugene.
Isn't it an insult to the opponent to show mercy during a duel?
Apologize for my presumptuous remark. Hazard bowed his head once more. I cannot feel any mana coming from Master Eugene. Hazard though as he glanced at the sandbags and chainmail piled behind Eugene just from a glance, they definitely seemed heavy. So Eugene was able to move with all of that hanging from his body? Hazard was finding it difficult to imagine such a sight. Master Cyan, for now, we should take a look at your injuries. While coaxing the boy, Hazard glanced over at Eugene. No matter how many times Hazard examined him, Eugene did not give off any traces of mana.
I stabbed him in the solar plexus with a spear.
Eugene explained helpfully. And where else?
I only landed one blow.
A single blow. Hazard let slip a low groan. If that's the case, Master Eugene, may we meet again? Unable to say anything further, Hazard bowed his head politely. Seal turned to look back at Eugene with a smile, saying, see you later.
Bye-bye. Have you heard if anyone is arriving today?
Yes. Nina replied, nodding her head. Having followed Eugene's orders, she was secretly gathering info. Masters Deacon, Hansen, and Juris are expected to arrive afternoon, also. Masters Gargis and Desra will be arriving by Warp Gate after them around dinner time. The last two were receiving a marked difference in treatment. But even Eugene knew the reason for this. Those two were the scions of high-ranking families among the collateral lines. It looked like everyone would be gathering earlier than he'd expected.
I'll be at the gymnasium if you need me.
Ever since Eugene had first heard about the bloodline continuation ceremony, he had thought that it was an odd tradition. As such, he had vowed to personally turn the tables on the main family during the bloodline continuation ceremony. Vermouth, don't feel sorry for them once I'm done messing with your descendants. After all, it wasn't like I asked to be reincarnated as your descendant.
So, my son, Cyan, challenged a collateral descendant to a duel, and lost?
Yes, Hazard replied. Hazard made sure not to lift his bent head. He didn't want to increase the number of reprimands he would be receiving. She looked at her son in disbelief.
Come here.
Mother.
I told you to come here.
Cyan's shoulders trembled, along with the rest of his body. Even so, although with hesitant steps, he walked forward until he stood in front of Ancilia. Taking a deep breath, Ancilia sharply thrust out her hand.
Ugh.
Cyan cried out.
In a single blow at that?
Mother, it hurts.
Stay still.
Just as he was about to step backward, Cyan's body immediately stiffened at the order.
Did you say that kid hasn't trained his mana?
Yes. Hazard answered.
That brat, has he truly not trained his mana?
Yes, I am willing to swear an oath on it. The son of Lord Gerhard, Master Eugene, has not trained his mana. Not even a single trace of mana can be sensed from his body.
Is that so?
Ancilia searched her memory for the name Gerhard. She seemed to recall that Gerhard was the name of a certain insect who didn't even possess an official title and was buried away.
Seal, just how did your brother go about losing?
The moment the duel began, Eugene thrust his spear. My brother was startled and tried to fall back, but Eugene's spear was too fast for him to avoid.
And what was your brother doing at that moment?
He was trying to raise his sword.
So he lost in a single strike without even raising his sword.
Mother Cyan was about to defend himself.
You foolish boy.
Cyan's head twisted to the side.
Someone who hasn't even trained their mana, a brat who's the same age as yourself. You allowed them to get the first hit? You weren't even able to dodge properly. And when he struck you, you collapsed, spraying vomit everywhere, right in plain view, where anyone, even the lower classes, could plainly see. You dare to lose after asking for the duel first? Your father should be returning soon for the bloodline continuation ceremony, but I don't know if I'll be able to even look him in the eye. As for that skank Theonis, how can I face her after this?
Sorry. I'm sorry, Mother. Streams of tears poured down from Cyan's eyes as he sniffled.
Hazard.
Hazard's head was still bowed low, and his shoulders trembled as he responded, Yes, my lady.
I wish I could just get rid of you for good, but I can't do that because you are my husband's favored knight. If your teaching isn't the problem, then my son is. Since he didn't learn well, he was defeated by that peasant brat.
My apologies.
Take Cyan and leave.
Ancilia ignored her son crying.
Go and make him stronger.
Hazard nodded his head and backed away. Even though Cyan was in tears, the boy followed Ancilia's orders without question, leaving the room along with Hazard.
Seal, you stay behind for a bit. That brat, you said that his name was Eugene, right?
Yes.
Ancilia wanted to go along with her urges and kill Eugene, however, she couldn't do that. If he is harmed, I'm the one who will receive the most suspicion if this line was crossed. The guardians of the family commandments would intervene in the situation.
Make friends with the child.
Why?
For now, that boy, Eugene, is still strong enough to beat your brother. As such, it would be better to get on his good side.
Understood, Mother. I'll make sure to get close to Eugene.
Deacon, who was 11, then Hansen, who was 14, and finally Juris, who was 10. These three children of minor collateral families arrived one after the other. As Eugene exchanged greetings with them, in his head, he lumped these three together under one identity. They're the dropouts. After the brief introductions, Eugene had returned to resume his training. It was an extension of the physical training that he'd done earlier that morning. After Eugene, Nina called out as she approached Eugene while also in a fluster. They are here.
Yeah, they came earlier than anticipated.
It looks like the master of the house has also returned. We have to go out to meet him. Wait, no. We need to get you changed first.
It would look better to be there in such a sweaty state than to be the only one who was late.
Eugene replied as he roughly patted down his hair. The servants of the main house were running out and lining up in front of the mansion. Even the knights stationed in the rear of the mansion were running up and getting into formation. The lines of knights drew their swords, all as one. Whoa! Eugene said to himself, impressed at the sight. Although the real power over the household had been taken from her hands, Theonis stood a few steps ahead of Ancilia. Eugene looked at the boy who was standing next to Theonis. Although he had a pretty handsome face, his eyes looked dull for someone his age, and his shoulders were slouched. This was Iode Lionheart, the eldest son of the main family and the first in the line of succession. Gilead Lionheart, the head of the main Lionheart line, had been away from the estate for 3 years. Under such circumstances, the authority of the head should normally rest in the hands of Theonis, the official first wife. The authority had fallen to Ancilia. After giving birth to her child, Iode, Theonis' body had been rendered barren, unable to bear any more children. Gilead, who wanted to make ample preparations for the continuation of his line, couldn't be satisfied with just one son. This was why he had taken a second wife, Ancilia, who had given birth to twins. A man riding a huge black horse leading 2 carriages behind him. There was no loud shouting or cheering. Instead, the knights welcomed their lord, who had returned after so many years, with a unified silence. And the one following behind him should be his younger brother, Guillaume. The head of the Lionheart family, Gilead, had 2 younger brothers. The second brother, Guilford, was already married but had yet to move out from the main estate.
Iode, it's good to see that you've grown quite a bit. Have your skills grown accordingly?
I have tried to live up to father's expectations. Iode trailed off as he avoided meeting his father's eyes. Gilead stared at his oldest son for a few moments before turning his head.
And is this really Cyan and Seal? I almost didn't recognize you. Children really do grow up quickly. It's so amazing.
I missed you, father.
At that moment, Gilead smiled brightly and nodded his head in approval. He could smell the scent of dirt and sweat coming from the twins. It was a scent that couldn't be sensed from Iode.
Guilford, I heard that you now have a child. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there to share that moment of celebration with you.
Big brother, please don't say something like that, Guilford responded with his head bowed. His gazed over the children from the collateral lines. The other children immediately straightened up, swallowing their fright. Eugene didn't care to follow their example. Gilead was just looking at them, so why act like their souls were about to leave their bodies?
There's no need to prepare anything special. Let's just go and enjoy a meal together, then we can discuss how the bloodline continuation ceremony is being held this year.
Gilead said, raising his voice so everyone could hear. Everyone gathered around a long, rectangular dining room table. The children of the collateral lines began sitting down at one end of the table. The 2 carriages that had arrived with Gilead had been carrying Desra and Gargis. Eugene took a seat next to Gargis. A young, blonde man was sitting next to Iode. The man had arrived in a separate carriage from the ones carrying Desra and Gargis.
And who's that bastard?
Seal could tell that Eugene was constantly eyeing the man. She had turned to look at the man sitting next to Iode.
Father.
Seal spoke up, breaking the silence.
Who is your guest?
I was going to introduce him a bit later, but...
I don't mind introducing myself now.
The man turned to look at the children with a friendly smile.
Hello children, it's nice to meet you all. My name is Loberian, and I am from Aratha's Red Tower of Magic.
Loberian. Several of the children tilted their heads as they seemed to recall having heard his name from somewhere. Why, you're the head wizard of the Red Tower, Iode said as he turned to look at Loberian with a shocked expression. Eugene gasped, accidentally spitting some hot tea. Eugene coughed violently.
Are you alright?
Yes. I'm fine. I'm alright.
If he's from the Red Tower, that means he's Sienna's disciple. But although they were far apart in terms of generations, both Loberian and the wise Sienna had served as the master of their respective Red and Green Towers. 300 years ago, Sienna had risen to become the youngest head wizard of the Green Magic Tower in all of Aratha's history. She was Great Vermouth's companion and an arch-wizard who could slay both dragons and demon kings. Countless wizards had found their way to the Green Tower, hoping to become Sienna's disciple. Her teachings had carried on to the present day, and 2 famed wizards who considered themselves disciples of Sienna had become the head wizards of the Red and Green Towers. Eugene hadn't expected that he would meet someone related to another old buddy of his here. If he's from the Red Tower, that means his specialty is summoning magic. Summoning magic was also one of Sienna's specialties.
You said that your name is Eugene, right? I heard quite the story from Theonis. My son, he insulted both you and your father.
At these words, Cyan started violently chewing on his bottom lip.
Yes, but there are no hard feelings left. I was able to vent all of my feelings towards him during our duel.
And you won the duel.
Even if I had been defeated, I wouldn't have held a grudge. That would just mean I was too weak to protect my honor, and as such, I would be obliged to endure the insult.
You're much more mature than my son. Cyan, I am not ashamed of your defeat. However, I am ashamed of you for avoiding meeting your father's gaze because of your shame and your defeat.
Yes.
I heard that the duel started because you insulted him, but even though you lost the duel, you did not apologize to Eugene.
That's...
Cyan, you bear the surname Lionheart. That means you are descended from the great Vermouth. To live up to the blood that you both share, you have to be able to respect the honor of others as well as your own.
I'm sorry, Cyan admitted, his nose sniffling as tears shone in his eyes. Even though Eugene realized this truth right away, he didn't point this out as he had never expected something like a sincere apology from Cyan in the first place.
I'm sorry to say this, but Eugene, I'm not familiar with your father.
That's only natural. Even I admit that my family is from deep in the countryside.
Did you learn your skills from your father?
He taught me the basics, but the rest I learned through training by myself.
What kind of training did you do?
I just trained with wooden swords and spears.
That means you must not have had anyone who could teach you.
Although we have a few knights at our estate as well, none of them were really good enough to qualify as my instructor.
He trained himself without a teacher. He got into a duel with Cyan and won. As these thoughts flashed through their minds, Gargis and Desra glanced at Eugene with astonished eyes.
It seems that this year's bloodline continuation ceremony will be fun.
The food started arriving from the kitchen.
I don't know if these dishes will suit your tastes, but please enjoy the meal. As you may have already guessed, the reason we have arranged to hold dinner like this is to explain the contents of this year's bloodline continuation ceremony. In this year's bloodline continuation ceremony, apart from the traditional goals, I also wanted to give all the participating family members a good opportunity to show what they can do. Although it might sound ridiculous coming from me, I believe bloodline continuation ceremony is a tradition that favors the direct descendants. Collateral descendants are not allowed to wield real weapons or even train with their mana. In this year's ceremony, 3 of my own children will be participating.
Gilead's 3 children all looked surprised at this admittance.
However, it is impossible to get rid of a long-standing tradition all at once. The bloodline continuation ceremony's main purpose has always been to confirm that those who inherit the name of Lionheart possess the same heroic qualities as the one they claim descent from, the Great Vermouth. Therefore, the concentration of the bloodline holds no importance.
Vermouth, your descendant seems like a better man than you were, Eugene thought.
I've decided to get some outside help for this year's ceremony.
And that's why I'm here. Nice to meet you all, children.
Loberian raised his hands. Mana gathered between his palms like a mist before forming into the image of a giant maze hovering over the dinner table.
All of you will enter the maze through a different entrance and begin exploring. There is only one simple thing that you all need to do. Head to the center of the maze to defeat the boss monster there. In addition to the monsters, we will also be preparing all sorts of traps inside the maze. Of course, no need to worry too much. None of you will be getting hurt inside the maze. Everything inside will be an illusion created by magic. So whatever happens to you all inside the maze, it won't actually be real. However, it will still seem like an extremely realistic experience. A monster you encounter inside the maze might even chop off your arm. So although your arm won't really be lost, you'll feel as if your arm really was cut off.
Whoa, was the shared response. Will it be okay if we can't make it to the center of the maze? Asked Hansen.
Of course it is. If you're afraid of moving forward, then it's also fine to just stay where you are. However, you won't get a very good score by doing so.
Loberian responded kindly as he looked at Hansen's chubby cheeks.
If I kill the boss monster, do I get anything for it?
I'll let you pick one item you desire from the main house's underground treasure vault.
Eugene smiled brightly and nodded his head while exclaiming in childish delight.
Wow!
What should I take, a sword, a spear, or a bow? Although the bloodline continuation ceremony hadn't even started yet, Eugene was sure that he would be the first one to break through the labyrinth. While thinking about the bloodline continuation ceremony, Eugene found two of his relatives waiting for him.